On this episode of Doing the Most, we are going to make one of my favorite recipes I have developed to date for this channel, a cherry limeade session mead. What makes this one so special to me is, for one, I love cherry limeades and cranberry limeades. Cranberry is probably the better limeade, but I love cherry limeades, and particularly I love cherry limeades from Sonic and Brahms. I'm just gonna get a large cherry limeade. Two very popular fast food chains here in Oklahoma. The cherry limeades in Oklahoma are light on the cherry, big on the lime, big on the lemon lime soda kind of aspect, and so that's what I was going for with this recipe. Now, there's still cherry in there, and you'll see I'm using kind of a silly ingredient for this. It's cherry pie filling that you buy in the can off the shelf at the grocery store, but it just works. It works in this recipe, and so don't go trying to substitute it with some kind of fresh cherries or frozen cherries. Cherry pie filling, I found, is the way to go. And if you want to boost up the cherry flavor, just double or triple the amount of cherries that we use in this recipe. Just account for the liquid volume. Also, we are using a jug of lime juice for this recipe. Look at this thing. No fresh squeezed limes here, and particularly because we're using so much lime juice, it would be kind of crazy to try and juice fresh limes for this recipe. And both of these really lowbrow ingredients are pretty important because we're not trying to create a really highbrow recipe here. What we're going for is something mimicking a fast food soda beverage. And so lowbrow's the way to go because it nails those points of like cheap and quick and checking off all the boxes for bliss points. And this recipe is award-winning. I won second place at a homebrewing event called Grovetoberfest in Edmond, Oklahoma with this very recipe. And so it is a proven hit, and that was a beer competition. So I knocked out dozens of beers with this session mead to win second place, and I'm pretty proud of that. So this recipe is actually really simple, and I am gonna show you here how to do it if you have a kegging system. If you were gonna do this bottle conditioned, you would have to use erythritol, which is a non-fermentable sweetener, to back sweeten this instead of honey, and then carbonate in the bottle. And you would just do that by, instead of using the back sweetening honey in this recipe, using erythritol to back sweeten, and then using some priming sugar to prime your bottles for bottle conditioning. So let's take a look at the ingredients. The ingredients for this cherry limeade mead are 6 pounds of honey, 5 grams of wine tannin, and water to 4.25 gallons. You can use EC1118 yeast, but in this video I'm going to use D47 because my house is pretty cold right now and D47 works well in those conditions. After fermentation completes, you're going to add 7 pounds of cherry pie filling. You're going to stabilize for secondary and then add 2.625 quarts of lime juice and 1.5 pounds of honey to back sweeten. Again, as you can see, it's a pretty simple ingredients list, but there are 2 things on there if you're making this in 5-gallon batches that are pretty big quantities. That cherry pie filling and, of course, all of that lime juice. Making this on a 1-gallon scale is probably quite a bit cheaper because you can just go to like a Walmart or Costco and pick these things up in small quantities. If you want to make a 5-gallon batch, I would recommend going to a restaurant supply store and buying in bulk there for your cherry pie filling or your lime juice because it's going to save you some cash. So with all that out of the way, let's take a look at how this is made. We begin this mead making process by scooping in our honey. Here, I'm just using regular old wildflower honey. And then we'll put in our wine tannin and begin adding our water. Our goal is to hit this around 1.050 starting gravity. So we'll add our water in incrementally and mix our honey up using this power drill, and then we'll start taking the gravity, and it should clock in around 1.050 around the time you get to 4 1/4 gallons. Like I said, we're going to be using D47 yeast here. Any clean fermenting wine or ale yeast should work just fine for this because it's pretty low ABV. And we're saving all of the acid for secondary, so no worries about difficulty getting a fermentation started from a pH standpoint. Once we have everything mixed up, we'll put on our lid and airlock and let that ride for 24 hours. After 24 hours, we're going to add 10 grams of Limeade O and let that complete fermentation. It should take 1 to 2 weeks to finish fermenting. At the end of fermentation, we're adding our cherry pie filling. I get this 7-pound can of cherry pie filling from a local restaurant supply store. This stuff has some sugars and some corn syrup in it, but it really has that maraschino cherry kind of flavor that you're looking for. Now, I'm from Oklahoma, where our cherry limeades aren't super cherry forward, so this adds just enough cherry flavor and color to hit that mark for me. But in adjusting this recipe for your palate, you might want to add more cherry or stabilize before adding the cherry in order to preserve that flavor a little bit more. Once we're ready to move to secondary, in that sanitized secondary vessel, we will add our lime juice. I also get my lime juice from the restaurant supply store and save a little bit of money buying it that way in bulk. Then we're adding our back sweetening honey. For my palate, 1.5 pounds of honey is enough for a 5-gallon batch, but I really do like my cherry limeades to be kind of lime soda forward. So that means it's a little bit on the tart side and a little bit on the less sweet side, but you might just want to adjust the sweetness after you're done. You might want to sweeten this upwards more. I don't think you would want to bring the sweetness down much though. It's definitely the type of thing where starting with 1.5 pounds and then working your way up, you'll be able to adjust. And you can adjust that a little bit in the keg if you need to. So with our honey and our lime juice in there, we will throw in our stabilizers, potassium metabisulfite and potassium sorbate, because this is going to sit and clear for a while. And so we want to make sure that it doesn't re-ferment while that process is taking place. Here you can see those beautiful cherries. They've lost a lot of their color and they're floating on top. So we're just going to rack from underneath the cherries into that carboy, letting everything mix together as it racks. Then we'll pop an airlock on top of that and let it clear some. We're not worried about letting it clear too much because we just want to let a lot of that bulk sediment settle out to the bottom, and then it'll clear up some in the keg while we're waiting for it to carbonate. And speaking of which, after it's cleared some and you've got a lot of that bulk sediment dropped out to the bottom, go ahead and transfer it to a keg. We're going to carbonate this to about 3 volumes of CO2. Nice big carbonation on that, so it mimics a delicious soda fountain soda.
All right, now it's time for a tasting. I was going to have Anna join me for this, but our 2-year-old has brought a fun cold bug home. So Anna's not feeling well, I'm starting to not feel well, but we're gonna get this tasting done regardless. This is the Cherry Limeade, our Cherry Limeade Session Mead. You can see it's still got a little bit of that lime juice haze. Nothing wrong with that. Let's give it a taste. It's crisp and refreshing. It's much more like the cherry limeade that Brahms offers, which is much more lime soda forward than the one that Sonic has, which is a little bit sweeter, has a little bit more of that cherry grenadine kind of flavor in it. This one is crisper, more refreshing, and it's in line with my flavor preference for a cherry limeade. Like I said earlier, if you wanted to add more cherry flavor, you could easily add more cherry pie filling. Another thing you could do is stabilize before adding the cherry pie filling so you don't get the fermented cherry flavor. You just have more of that plain kind of maraschino cherry flavor. Overall, obviously it was a winner at competition and it's one of my favorite things. And like so many of my session mead recipes, it is adjustable to fit your flavor preference. Whether you want it less tart or more sweet or more tart and less sweet, that's all up to you, and the components are all there. You just have to organize them how you want. If you like this video, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming content here on Doing the Most Brewing. And if you feel so inclined, hit that super thanks button below this video to thank us us for this content. Until next time, happy brewing. I hope your health stays on the up and up. It's cold and flu season, so stay cautious out there. And cheers.
Homemade brews and various how-tos, everything from mead to roast, bake creation, fermentation, inebriation, doing the most.